Welcome, everyone. Brent Wessler with a second episode of Automation in Action podcast. Today, I have Kevin Neal, the president of P3. Correct me if it's P3ID. Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah, it's the power of three intelligent data.
Okay, and welcome. I know Kevin's out on the West Coast. It's a little early in the morning. Appreciate you joining us today. So today we wanted to kind of have you on and discuss the current state of document imaging and capture. I was on your webinar. You're the TWAIN networking chairman, I believe.
Technically it's a marketing chair of the TWAIN working group. So that's
that's marketing chair. Okay, yeah. Yes. And we talked a lot about capture and what the space looks like, and we wanted to do a follow-up to that. Basically, you as an organization, maybe explain what you guys started off, because you've been in the industry quite some time. You've worked for capture vendors like Abby. You started off in the industry, I believe, in the imaging side, and then kind of get into security, and wanted just to kind of maybe explain to everyone exactly what your organization does.
Yeah, so there's, as you mentioned, I'm a president of P3ID, which is a commercial for-profit organization. Then I'm also the marketing chair for the TWAIN working group. So I'll kind of just give you a brief history of where I come from, because it's important to kind of have this perspective, because I love to jump forward to where we are at today with all this exciting hyperscalers, and we get to IDP and AI in the cloud, but that's not where we started, right? So I started a long time ago at a very famous distribution company called Los Cypress Distributing Company, and we were the #1 imaging distributor for mostly hardware products, and we were before Tech Data and Ingram Micro and New Wave Technologies. Before all those distributors were around, we were #1 distributor. So that's where we got my start in the warehouse there. And I was putting, I started shipping, a Fujitsu M3093 with a SC1010 coax cable and some adrenaline boards. So,
that was back when the adrenaline boards were there, right?
Yeah,
big adrenaline boards, SCSI connection.
SCSI and video interfaces, yeah. And was no USB, no Wi-Fi, no Ethernet. So at that time you had to get, if it was a double-sided scanner, and we didn't even have color scanners at that time, but if we had a double-sided scanner, you had to get 2 cards, 2 proprietary cables to the 2 interfaces on the scanners. And the scanners were very expensive and all this proprietary stuff. So it just gives you an example of where we come in the last 25 years. Is now you just plug in something, it's almost plug and play.
Right. Everything's duplex. You used to have simplex only scanners. You don't have that anymore.
Yeah, have all this automation of automatic color detection, auto page rotation, cropping, deskewing, all this. So it gives you incredible opportunities. But anyways, I worked in distribution. I got to learn the part numbers and stuff. And then I went to Fujitsu as a product marketing manager for their production scanners and their network scanners. And that's what's going to be important in this discussion, is that at that time, we were just coming out with the network scanners. HP was about the only one with the digital senders at that time that had a network scanner. And they had it for a long time. They were a leading company, but not really focused. It was a very small percentage of HP's kind of overall portfolio. So Fujitsu came out with one, Canon about the same time, Kodak. Everybody came out with the first version.
Yeah, the P500, I think Canon had, and then Kodak had the Scan Station, which was that big, huge thing. And what is this, circa 2007?
It was about 2007, 2009.
Okay.
2010ish. That was kind of the beginning. Yeah, Kodak had the Scan Station 100. Canon had the Scan Front 300. And then we had the
front. That's what it was.
Yeah, and we had the FI 6000 NS at that time. So, but the important thing was these were network attached devices, and then they came with toolkits. They came with SDKs, and web services were just starting at that time. I mean, AWS was, I don't even know if they were kind of losing a lot of money.
Very new. Right.
Very new. Box was just coming around and stuff. So that was fun. So I got to work with a lot of ISVs and do integrations for network scanning platform in there. But I was kind of a fish out of water at a hardware company. So I took the leap of faith, like you said, my last corporate job was Abby Software House. And that was really fun because they're known as an OCR company, but they're actually a language company first.
Hmm.
And OCR was a result of taking images and transforming them into text, and then understanding that text instead of just optical characters. And I think we'll talk a lot about that today. So that was cool that I got to work with their text analytics, and that was kind of the early days of Alexas and Google Homes. Behind the scenes, that's natural language processing and understanding, right?
Right.
So, and Abby is a language company trying to solve a very complex problem. Even Google, Microsoft, they're getting a lot better, no doubt about it. But I still ask my Echo, very a two-parted question, not even a complicated question, and it gets it wrong a lot of times. I don't know that, or some really hallucination kind of
Right.
answer. Right? So, anyways, that was fun. Okay, so let me go to your answer. So that was kind of just my history, kind of a long-winded answer. But P3's made a commercial product around the TWAIN. So the TWAIN working group has been around a long time, 25, 30 years.
Yep.
We're a nonprofit organization, and we've created the TWAIN driver, and it's used by tens of millions of devices. And basically what the software application, like your DocuWare, doesn't talk to your hardware device directly. There's a driver in between.
Sure.
And it says, okay, software, I want to talk to the scanner, and it talks to it in a standard way. So we've created an open source standard, and the TWAIN Classic driver. Go ahead, Brent.
And there's only two right? ISIS and TWAIN are really the two, right? ISIS is owned by EMC or whoever bought them recently.
Open text.
You have to pay. Okay, so open text, you have to pay them a royalty, right? To
Yes.
use that versus TWAIN, which is an open standard.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Okay, right.
And there's pros and cons, right? Yeah, EMC. Well, now EMC is open text,
Right.
And ISIS is a standard, just like TWAIN, but it is a royalty, and usually it's not the ISV that pays the royalty. It's usually the scanner manufacturers. They pay it to OpenText to create the ISIS standard. And at one time, there was a perception that ISIS was production and TWAIN wasn't.
Faster, right. That's no longer right.
That's not
well,
true.
I think also as USB speeds have increased, USB 3, that also, I assume TWAIN works through USB, right?
Yeah.
Is that how
yes.
Yeah. So that increased. And as you mentioned earlier, adrenaline boards back in the day to drive high production scanners, you needed those SCSI cards. And again, just kind of like Blockbuster, just it never evolved and it just got eclipsed, it cannibalized. So interesting.
Yeah, and with it was Captiva, and then it was Dell, and then it was CMC, and then it's OpenText. So, but with them, a commercial application, you also get support. So with the video cards, you had to do IRQ settings and a lot of troubleshooting. So in those days, it made a lot of sense to go with ISIS, but I really don't know how much focus OpenText has on that. They have capture and document management, workflow and security. It's very small. I don't even see it kind of advertised anymore.
Now, do you? So we sell DocStar. We sell some other ancillary products that are more ISIS driven, but so they only support PIX-TWAIN. What's the difference between PIX-TWAIN and TWAIN? Because I noticed that PIX-TWAIN scanners are only supported in DocStar, for instance. I see that in some other applications. Do you know what that difference is?
Yeah, so even a company like Pixel Translations, who created the ISIS driver, even they knew that having a toolkit was probably more important than just focus on the driver itself. So they even have scanning SDKs, and where you can create applications quicker using the SDK, but you still use the TWAIN driver. So it's pretty amazing that even they, support their own ISIS and as well as TWAIN. So it's just a PixTools SDK library.
So it's basically an ISIS conversion, or it's a TWAIN amalgamation toolkit that they put together, I guess, to support that, and that's why only certain scanners support. Interesting. Yeah. So I remember Pixel Technology. Wow, that was so many years ago. So I guess So I guess ultimately, how did P3 get into security? After this.
So that's so I started in the warehouse, but I'm actually I'm more of a network administrator by trade. I love to connect IP addresses, DHCP, DNS. I mean, I'm just a network.
One. I love IP address. Subnetting.
Subnetting, yeah. If you look at my phone, I've got like 20 different devices on my home router here. So it's like I'm just a network junkie. But But I managed a network infrastructure, so I had to manage the email servers, the DNS servers, all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of a hobby of mine, and I knew that it was important to have security, but also accessibility. So you had to balance those two things. So it was kind of just came natural to me. That's why like I gravitated towards a network scanner, because I just had this comfort with talking networking, and the complexity of connecting things isn't so easy, and it's kind of an art. It's fun, right? So I saw this opportunity. Yeah, I know.
I don't think very many people would say that's fun, but it's okay. You clearly love what you do.
Yeah, and I love release IP and IP config and all these command line interface tools. But that's where the intersection of the network scanner and the and imaging came in for me. Was that okay? The network scanner, it needed multi-factor authentication, it needed Active Directory services, it needed encryption on the device, it needed encryption, it needed all these security things. And we were working with a lot of enterprise customers, and still are, and they need a big long list of security things. And I thought, okay, if it's easy enough to connect the scanner to the cloud at that time, and we were just doing like the first iterations of connecting network scanners to cloud services, like we did an NSI integration, we did a eCopy integration. It was really cool. There was like 15 ISVs that we did in about a 2-year period there. So connecting wasn't the hard part, and the web services were coming around, but all these security things were coming around. So that's where we really got in focus into security personally. So now we're doing things like content authentication and new kinds of encryption and blockchain and all kinds of
so a lot of these things don't. So like these softwares either don't support or the Fujitsu network scanners just don't have a lot of this capability in it. Is that why you built these tools?
Well, I wouldn't say that the network scanners don't have it. I would just say that they are very focused on hardware and kind of drivers. Security isn't their cup of tea, even though,
sure,
like, you know, Fujitsu has a big security division, and Canon and Epson, and all of them have their own security. But usually these scanning groups don't, you know, interface with the security group. So I would say there's a lot of room for improvement. Specifically, and I'll give you one, Brent, that's coming.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is a bonus for everybody watching this podcast, because there's something called the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark coming. And what does it mean? All these like personal IoT devices, the routers and the even baby monitors and stuff, and network scanners, anything with an IP address, there's this Cyber Trust Mark that the United States government is coming out with. And basically it says default usernames and passwords. Brent, your home router, right? The home router, I could probably guess when it out of the box, admin password.
Admin. Right.
Admin.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well, there you go. And then somebody just scanning walking by your house, it could scan and says, I'll just try a couple combinations, and I'm in your home router, right?
Right.
And then they get on your home network, they steal all your stuff, they get your passwords into your banks. Like, it's just a huge problem. It's probably way underreported. So
I saw you report. I saw you on LinkedIn. I know you're a big social poster, and I saw that yesterday on literally. I mean, think about it. Your Nest Ring cameras, your Nest. In a lot of cases, there's home automation, and so literally everything is Wi-Fi connected at this point. I mean, you could even say, like speakers and other things that are on your network. So what so the standard's coming out, but like, how could somebody hack? And you get into your Nest Cam. Yeah, you could turn somebody's heat up or down, but how do they use that? Do they penetrate through these IoT devices to get to your router, to then get to your banking and all that other information?
Yeah, listen. Once they're on your internal network, they could, like, if you have network sharing on, and you could just browse the network. Usually, and I'm not saying that Nest or Ring has that capability, but the point is, it's on your home network. It's got an IP address behind your firewall, and these people are very smart. They can get into there, and then they go, So once they get onto your network, then they can get into your usernames and passwords for your computers. Maybe you're running some servers. So it just,
so this new cyber. Is this a new cyber security law to prevent from default usernames and passwords?
So they haven't got the official specification, but NIST and CISA and all those big agencies are coming up with the standards. And one of the things is that default usernames and passwords is not going to be acceptable. You will not get the US Cybertruck mark unless you can have dynamic passwords. So it's something that's dynamic or unpredictable, or even better yet, it has multi-factor authentication directly to the devices, right? Not just usernames and passwords, but you have to authenticate with a PIN that sends to your phone or your face or your voice or your iris, maybe multi-factor authentication, or maybe the devices are getting fed the Cisco stock that closed yesterday, right? That changes every single day. So every single day that password's changing. There was just another case of a cybersecurity breach in healthcare, right? And
I saw that, today,
they were on the network for a long time and it wasn't detected. Guess what? If the passwords have been changing all the time, then by default you could be secure. So there's many ways that you can apply security, and I would just say that because of this, the interest in the network scanner vendors in particular to create network scanners that work. I mean, that's their first job, but they really haven't done a good job of security. So that's where P3 is coming in, Brett, is that we want to add all this kind of very high level of security. Even though you think you might not need it, you're a small business. Believe me, you don't want to be, responsible for a hack that came in through one of your IoT network scanners.
Interesting. So I don't know a ton about cybersecurity. I know it's obviously hot. There's ransomware, there's malware, there's, we actually train our staff because we're SOC 2 compliant, and we have endpoints that have access to our multi-tenant AWS cloud. So we have to go through curricula. It's and there's constantly new things, phishing and vishing. Somehow, people get a hold of a video. I mean, it's like unbelievable impersonation using SIM cards and all those types of things. So, like, in terms of your go-to-market strategy, or what you sell to customers, I know you have a couple pieces of software, but where do you really focus? Have you been focusing on IoT, or is it primarily within document capture and then wrapping, 2FA and multi-factor around those types of things? I mean, what are some of the projects that you're doing around these initiatives?
So the answer is no. You never sell just a technology, Brent. You know that, right?
Okay.
You're a solutions guy. You want to solve a problem, right? So that's what we're really good at, quite frankly, is that, we listen to the customer, we observe their workflow, even if they can't really articulate, hey, I got this pain or whatnot. By watching them work or hearing their business process, there's usually always a way we can come in. So maybe sometimes it is, hey, like we're working with some customers, hey, you got 3 people that are doing key entry. That's pretty obvious, right?
Data entry automation, key entry.
Yeah.
So what are some of the use cases that you've solved?
So I'll give you, we have a transportation logistics company that we're working with. And they, in the invoicing and the remittance process, there's a lot of issues in the timing. In other words, they get the proof of delivery before the invoice even comes, so like there's timing back and forth. So in those cases, we can help them in the workflow to basically work with the ERP systems to basically capture the data, have the data ready, waiting, have this packing list waiting for the invoice to come in and do the whole 3-way match, which is pretty typical in our industry. But they have a real problem. But they also have inconsistencies, like going back to our talk about natural language, is that sometimes when they have a short pay, maybe a shipment was damaged, and the customer short pays it because they got a damaged box and they're not paying for that pallet or box. But they write it in the email, in the body of the email, and it just says, I've short paid the invoice, and that's it, right? And then you have to go back and forth on the emails and stuff. So what we're doing is basically standardizing the exchange of the invoice data, but also the remittance data. That's number 1. Number 2 is working with the ERP system. But then also we're doing the very more sophisticated things, like trying to read the emails themselves and adjudicate the processing by reading the email and contextually understanding which invoice to apply it to, which one's short paid. Because again, this timing of and going back and forth on email is just very time consuming. There's no way to really solve it right now other than humans reading the email and then making decisions. And if you make a decision, a bad decision or a poor decision because you don't have the right information on the front end, to clean it up in the back end workflow is like 8 times more expensive.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, that's what we do as well. So, clearly the ability to use like semi or unstructured recognition on documents that don't have structure. But how about from a security perspective? We talked a lot about IoT. We talked a lot about, how we can enable security on, distributed scanners. We do a lot of the same things you do. I guess what makes you unique in the market as it relates to the services you offer?
So I'm gonna give you another one, Brent. This
Yep.
is like a freebie day. So
Awesome.
so we're talking about cybersecurity a lot, but and you kind of alluded to it with deep fakes and fake videos and but there could be fake images too. And this is I'm learning a lot about this in
Yeah, the
healthcare.
AI. Yeah, you saw that where somebody called and used the voice of their boss to the person and released like $20 million. And it was a deep fake. It was AI generated voice that sounded exactly like her boss, right?
You can't
It's
know.
unbelievable, right? How do you handle that human element? Curious to see what story you have.
So we're focused on documents, so we're not doing the voice detection. But
Yep.
as far as it goes from documents, because we're embedded at the endpoint. In other words, using the TWAIN Direct technology, this is the driver inside the scanner, and we have technology that can go inside of the scanner. So at the moment that image is created from the scanner, we know the user that created it, the IP address, a MAC address, the location, and then we can embed a manifest file. And it's a new project. It's called the Content Authenticity and Provenance. So embed a manifest file that says this is a truthful, authentic image, and you could reliably put it in your workflow. In other words, it has not been well, even if it is altered, at least you know who did it and where. Like, okay, I scanned an image. Maybe the description was wrong, and I annotated the image and I changed it, but it says Brent opened it up on this date, this time, and changed it. So altering an image isn't a bad thing necessarily. There's reasons you want to annotate it or change it, but at least you keep a log file with it. So let's take an example. And I just learned this in healthcare, is that there's a lot of malpractice billing insurance companies, and then the insurance companies just pay it. It's billions or trillions of dollars of
Really? You
fraud.
can never get healthcare companies to pay for anything. Funny, you can get them to pay for malpractice. Interesting.
Yeah.
You're
So
finding these little niches. These are the kind of the niches I always try to find where there's pain, right? That you don't really understand or know that they're even there.
it's a massive problem of fraud in healthcare
Huh.
when it comes to billing. So if the insurance companies and the billers, if they can agree on this standard, maybe the C2PA standard of content authenticity, and says, okay, insurance company, I automatically trust you by default because I know I could read that manifest file that you've created at the endpoint. Doesn't mean you scanned it to some web service, because between that scanner and the cloud service, this is the weakest link, and in the weakest link, it could have been altered or modified once it hit the server, before it hit the server. But from the endpoint to their receiving, this is all encrypted directly to it. I could automatically trust it in my workflow. And then guess what? I don't have to have somebody pulling up an image and then going to some other system to kind of validate the data, which they probably do today, and a lot of phone calls back and forth.
They're doing that through EDI. Is that the means? Yeah, right. Yeah. So because there's a healthcare standard for HCFAs, UBs, I think it's 837, 835 for EOBs. And those are the adjudication documents, I believe, that are being passed back and forth, right?
Yeah, so they have all the document, and then they have standards like HL7 and FHIR to exchange data exchange format. So yeah, so when it comes to cybersecurity, there's a lot of things that you could be proactive with: authentication, encryption, all those kind of standard. Those are standard things, but it's still like multi-factor authentication. It's a must anymore. It's not optional. Salesforce is enforcing it. QuickBooks. Almost all application providers are enforcing this because a username and password is too easy to be hacked, right? And people repurpose their passwords all the time and If you get
Yeah, and that's hard. It's hard for us as automation experts and
yeah,
consultants too, because we use a lot of robotic process automation. That's a one thing that really sucks because a robot can't answer a phone right now to get the code to do the multi-factor authentication. So that's a real
mhm.
blocker for us, but clearly critical to any type of security, right, in any organization at this point,
Well,
because you can username and passwords too easy to hack.
well, I'll tell you. Remember, MGM Resorts was hacked
Yeah,
a couple months
yeah.
ago, and it was a 10-minute call to their IT desk, and basically, yeah, the hackers just called and said, "Hey, can you reset my password?" And somehow they had access to somebody's email, right? Some internal IT person. Well, actually, what they did was
Right.
they went on LinkedIn, they found somebody that was in the IT department at MGM Resorts, and they called the help desk and they said, "Can you reset my password?" And they sent them reset. Click here, right? And then they
Right.
reset the password and they got in and they did huge billions and billions of dollars worth of damage. So, Brent, how can we easily solve that? So
Yeah.
instead of just sending a reset password, you also have to provide your fingerprint, maybe, or your
Yeah.
face, right?
Biometric. Right.
That's all that had to be implemented. And guess what? It would cost like $1 per month per user. Like, there's no excuse for these kind of things to
In
continually happen.
2024, knowing that these companies are getting killed, it's the same adage that I always have. Like, nobody does anything until there's a compelling event, right?
Right.
And so, we had a company, they had all their files in a basement, and then a tornado hit Springfield, Massachusetts, which has never happened and ever up this way. They lost all their files, they got sued, they got all that, and then they came, hey, we need a document management system. Like, you should have had some, being pragmatic and put these things in place. But clearly, companies are still not learning from that. So I guess in terms of the solution that you offered around, I guess circling back here to
Yeah.
to the use case. So what was the end result? What did you actually implement for this security measure? I guess on these in this healthcare billing situation.
So this is evolving. So we haven't done this yet, but we're taking all these things that I'm talking about, is that securing the endpoint with multi-factor authentication on the device itself, right? This isn't through the application, but the endpoint is secure, right? And then the encrypted transportation is secure. And then you're using their usernames and their passwords, not in one system. Because Brent, a very famous security guy told me one time, there's three basic things to an application. There's the users, there's the storage, and then there's the encryption. If you trust one provider with
Translation. Yeah.
all three things, then once they're hacked, they have all those three things. So separate the usernames, separate your encryption key storage and in your storage. So storage, encryption, and users, keep those separate, right? So if you do that, so the way that our system's architected, and our part of our solution is called ScanBot. So ScanBot is a web scanning application built with TWAIN Direct technology that includes everything I've just mentioned: multi-factor authentication, biometric identities, encrypting at the endpoint, encrypting in travel, the content authenticity manifest file, the blockchain. So it includes all these security measures. So in those cases, yeah, you could deploy the
Where do you
scan.
get so you ScanBot's your own product that you guys created
Yep.
to so basically you have a solution you can go to market immediately with. You don't have to like cut, I mean you can customize, but you have an out of the box solution with what, any Twain connected scan device, and that could be a network or connected scan device.
Yes. So ScanBot's a web application and it uses TWAIN Direct technologies. So there's a few manufacturers that have put TWAIN Direct inside of their firmware. So remember in the beginning I said
Yep.
there's a TWAIN driver installed on a computer, and that the software application talks to the TWAIN driver, then it talks to this. So now the computer goes out of the equation. The application ScanBot talks directly to hardware. So this is ideal because it
Right.
reduces costs and more secure.
Right.
You
You're
know, if
never get the endpoint is never really involved at that, right?
that's right.
I mean, the local memory is probably driving the scanner, right? But
Yep,
the transmission is direct, and a direct channel is what I would say.
it is direct.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because you see a lot of copiers, right?
Hmm.
They have hard drives, they store, and there's been a lots of issues with compliance and security around, when you're scanning a document that gets stored on that hard drive of that copier.
That's right.
Um, right. So, I know having worked for Kodak, we had the Infuse scanner, which would have a direct channel, which would be HIPAA compliant. There's literally, it doesn't stop anywhere. It goes directly from the firmware to the endpoint, wherever that is. So your scan bot is that, so this is a tool that basically just drives the scanner. Does it do any extraction or other? So
So,
it's really
so
just a secure channel.
yeah, so ScanBot itself is just a image only scanning web scanning application,
Hmm.
and it uses TWAIN Direct. It can use TWAIN Classic using what we call the TWAIN Bridge. So TWAIN Bridge translates TWAIN Classic commands into TWAIN Direct API. So theoretically, it can use any USB attached scanner also, but network scanners are much more preferred because of all the reasons we just mentioned. But
Sure. Right.
if you wanted to use a legacy scanner, you can. But yes, it's a direct channel, and ScanBot itself, it creates the image, but it does have exports, and it does have an API also, so you can export to any backend system, Kofax, Abby, Azure, AWS. It doesn't matter, right? It's in the process of creating a connector. It's probably about a couple maximum, even if like you're brand new to it. So we've created a QuickBooks connector and a Salesforce connector and a couple other DocuShare connector, and we've created a bunch of connectors on our
So
own.
you have an API
We-
that you can connect. You can make your own connector. Anything that has an API, you probably can hook to, right? At this point.
Exactly. And we have an offering through the TWAIN Working Group. So we have an offering for commercial businesses, for TWAIN Working Group members, and then for students. So you can come in and get TWAIN Direct hosted services. You can get us, we'll host the service for you. And then you can create a web scanning application or even a desktop application that uses our hosted API that then drives the scanner. So we have
Hmm.
so you don't have to go set up your own server and set up all the web services and stuff.
Do you know much about the OpenText Pix tools for
Yeah.
WebDriver? So I know Kodak uses that. I don't know
Yeah.
how secure it is, but it's certainly easy to allow for web scanning. It's an installer. You have to install locally, which I assume you have to do something of that sort. No,
No.
so
So
ScanBot has no physical local install.
yeah, so I was a big fan of the EMC Cloud Toolkit when it came out, and this was before TWAIN Direct. And listen, I have a lot of friends at EMC Captiva over the days, so I thought a lot of the web scanning capability of the Cloud Toolkit. But you just said it. Even though it's a web scanning application, and at that time when it was coming out, that was very, very new, right? They were one of the
Right.
first only, and it had a couple ISVs that created integrations, so that was cool. But you still had to install software. Even though it's a one-time install, you still had to install something. And to me, that kind of defeated the whole purpose, right? You
Yeah,
wanted,
that's obviously. So do you get around that with
yeah,
TWAIN Direct
yeah,
on the device itself?
yeah. Then that's the key thing
Ah,
because the scanner manufacturers they basically have the driver inside of the firmware. With the
right,
EMC, it's still installed on a computer, right? So you could have a web scanning application, yes, but you had to use the ISIS or the TWAIN driver
right.
still. In ours, because the TWAIN Direct inside of the scanner, the software application, that's why it's called TWAIN Direct. It's software application directly to the hardware device. And this is what's so exciting about it and so new is that, okay, cool, I could do web scanning, but I could do it with absolutely zero
Zero
software,
footprint.
and zero,
Right.
none whatsoever.
That's pretty interesting how that works.
Yeah.
So, in terms of, I mean, clearly I didn't actually know with Coin Direct, you didn't need a local install to drive the local peripheral because that's like, how do you drive the local peripheral? So that's new and exciting. So I guess what excites you about 2024 and beyond? Because I mean, we're at the precipice in terms of AI, but we're also at the mercy of lots of countries and lots of people that want to hack. They're getting good at it. Again, I don't do a lot with security, but what are you seeing as trends or things that we're going to need to prepare for as organizations, whether it's imaging, security, your thoughts on what the year's going to bring.
So I'll bring it back to where I started, right? It was so hard to do things in the past, the video interfaces and the adrenaline cards, ionic seaport, and all this expense. I had to spend $25,000 to get an image on screen. Remember Cornerstone? Like, we didn't even have color monitors. We had monochrome monitors. They weren't even high enough resolution. They were like not 1600 by 1200 resolution like we have now. They were these big CRTs, not flat screens. So basically, we could just plug in a device. You could even use our phones, right, to take pictures. And so this is all, it gives us opportunity, Brent, is because, and there's so many good AI systems and IDP systems. They're sprouting up all the time. Like, really small companies can do amazing things. So because of the internet and because web services and because big hyperscalers are paying attention to our market, our
Yeah.
capture market, and how important capture is to them, and intelligent content. They call it different things, but they're doing the same thing that we've done
Yeah,
for a long time.
document AI. I mean, a lot of people don't know Microsoft even does, and I post on it a lot, but a lot of people don't even know Microsoft's even in the game.
Yeah. So how do they create intelligent content from images, right? OCR, ICR, and applying AI, and then
Or
histograms.
DALL-E, which is your text actually reads you. The, Kevin just sent you a picture of a cat next to a door. Like, it
Yeah.
reads you what the image looks like.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing.
They can classify all the objects and the images. Like, so
Right.
so this is what excites me, Brent. But I think, even though I've been talking about this stuff for 15 years, right, since 2010, basically, just to round off, well, 14, 15 years, right? I've been talking about, connecting scanners to cloud services and doing magical stuff. And we need all this security stuff because now it's not behind your corporate firewall, right? Remember, in the old days, you didn't even have to all log into your scanning application usually, because it was behind the firewall. You just go walk over to a computer. There's some kind of your Kofax on there, your Abby, and you just press scan, and then it goes to your local server, and it does the OCR, and then it exports to your SharePoint system or whatever, right? But now with cloud services, guess what? You have to have authentication. You have to be secure. You have to have all these things, right? So security is a must. So long story short, it's basically we're just at this stage where we can do these incredible things. And guess what? You as a company, you don't have to go to a FileNet and spend $1 million and 2 years to kind of develop your internal workflow, right? You can go get this vendor, this vendor, this vendor, and roll your own, some of it, You can go get Scanbot, and then put it together with some cool IDP AI system. And guess what? You can support your own infrastructure because you just have some person that knows web services, right? They can maintain it. And you can have a really great business efficiency system. So I think
Yeah,
it's
that's an
a
interesting point that me, I was on with you and ISVs and the file nets of the world. I mean, many years ago, right? That those were Documentum, FileNet, AX. These were the big behemoths, monoliths, and like I still have trouble even justifying why somebody would buy a FileNet. It's so overly complex. You can get a lot of the same functionality with these hyperscalers and these ancillary products, and to try to do anything is super expensive. But it was the old adage, like, you used to buy SAP because no CIO got fired for buying SAP. And the reality is you have the Acumaticas of the world and the Dynamics of the world, which are a lot less expensive, a lot more economical, a lot easier to support and handle. And you get a lot more of these serverless type environments now, like Microsoft's 365, that there's no even server that you have to even roll out. The service is serverless. So, like, do you see the industry like embracing, more individual ISVs, or more up and comers? Because you do see a lot of these kind of niche players, certainly within IDP, the Rossums of the world, which is really just kind of making IDP better, faster, quicker, more, affordable, more efficient. Where do you see kind of these behemoths, these old stalwarts, where do you see them going now?
I still think there's a place for both because, when you're going from hard copy to digital, you're betting your whole business on this, right? If you go all in on this and it doesn't work, and you're trying to roll your own and trying to go on the cheap, and maybe you're going with small, unstable businesses, they might go away overnight. So if you go that route, you got to have plan on your own support and those kind of things. But you could save some bucks, right? That's cool. So there's a reason for going with SAP and Oracle and the safe ones. So I think it's going to be a mixture of both, right? If you need a document management system that's 24/7, right? You probably want somebody more stable where if I have to call at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're going to be there, right? And they're going to be
Right.
able to
You don't want a $10 million ISV that's managing your $200 million capture business, and yeah, something happens, there's an issue for sure. I can see that.
yeah,
But I also see a lot of consolidation in our industry, which,
sure.
you look at Kofax, they bought SideGen, and not to pick on Kofax or Tungsten as they are, but they buy them and then it's a legacy product. And I wouldn't say the support's great on those types of things. And I also think they make it more difficult. But as you point out, having an ISV partner, you get the training, you get the support that you normally wouldn't get with maybe like somebody like Microsoft. If you embrace their platform, you kind of have to have everything internally. So there's more of that, if you want to go self-serve, I think you could save some money. But at the same point in time, if you want to be kind of handheld and ensure that, you have the resources there, then I guess a Tungsten or a Abby makes sense, right?
Yeah, and I think the point is that companies are empowered more than ever. It's not the vendors that are in control anymore. I can go to any good IDP. There's hundreds of them, right?
Right.
And I could say, hey, Microsoft, I'm going to use AWS, and AWS, I'm going to use Google, right? And that's the truth. I could switch in a day, right? I could just switch my API from them to them, and I can move my workloads because they're Kubernetes, right? So you're not controlling me anymore. I'm not locked into your ecosystem. So it allows me negotiation. It allows me freedom, and I love those kind of things. I'm a guy that learned technology with open source, Apache, MySQL, PHP, right? So I got hands-on with all these, and all these great tools, right? And I want to give back. So that's why I'm such a passionate person at the TWAIN Working Group, because it is open source. It is free, but it's not a solution in itself. It needs people to come in, embrace it, add to it, add technologies, add capabilities, do testing.
Yeah,
So,
look at Direct TWAIN. I mean, I didn't even know about that. And to be honest, I thought, imaging, what could they possibly come up with that's groundbreaking, but drive a peripheral without any install? Like, how did that come up? When did that come up? Is that
yes,
recent?
it's been in the works for probably since 2005, so maybe 9 or 10 years. Yeah, it's been on the roadmap for a long time because the TWAIN Working Group consists of a lot of the big companies like Fujitsu, Ricoh, Kodak, Epson. A lot of the main document scanner companies are part of our group. So they came together a long time ago, formed the TWAIN Working Group to create a standard to communicate to devices. So that group, even before I became part of their group, said, okay, we need a cloud-friendly kind of API service for the for the scanner driver. So that's when they came up with the idea of TWAIN Direct, and then they created the specification and went through that whole process, and everybody bought off onto it. And then in 2009, which was 5 years ago, we actually released the specification. Then it took a couple years of education, and then and then Xerox finally put it in the firmware of the scanners, and that was a couple years ago. So, now we've got a long list of ISVs that have actually created integrations with TWAIN Direct. So it's been a long time.
So it's been out. Yeah, so 5 or 6 years this thing's
5 years.
been out, and I don't see a lot of, again, I mean, improving IDP and capture through the cloud is critical. You're seeing, we see it here. We used to sell a lot of on-premise document management, I would say, and we used to sell servers like physical. We don't do it anymore. There's no need, and everybody's being moved to the cloud. And I think a lot of the angst around moving to the cloud has kind of been eclipsed by the benefits and the accessibility and the convenience of it. But then security becomes even more paramount, right? So we circle always back to the security element of that, and which is interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm kind of laughing because what we were saying about cloud and IDP and all this kind of stuff. So Harvey Spencer yesterday on
yeah,
LinkedIn, he said AI needs data, and it was just
yeah.
kind of a statement. And I
Well, you
was
can't
thinking, like,
build a large language model without
there you
samples and data,
there
right?
you go, there you
Yes.
go. So you have all these great systems, but they can't see the forest through the trees. How do they get content into their systems?
Well, that
It's
was
not
Abby's problem building Vantage, right?
right.
You
Yeah,
can't get enough samples.
yeah, yeah.
That's why the hyperscalers, I mean, if you think about work productivity, they call it modern work now. But I mean, it's the Teams and the Outlook and the Office integration. I mean, there's really two players. There's G Suite and Microsoft. And, they've done a better job from a document AI perspective because they can get samples and they can get crowdsourced learning and they have big cloud infrastructure, right? I think I think like a Rossum or a Hyperscience, they don't have the scalability of an Azure or Google, right? I'm not saying, hey, give up, because clearly, some of these companies are really focused on that myopic kind of product or solution. But how do you compete with a Microsoft? I mean, I just know the pricing, and Abby's 20 times more expensive than Microsoft, and you don't have to pre-buy anything, and it's
Yeah,
easy to access. So I don't know how these other ISVs within Capture are really going to be able to handle those types of questions. Although when right now adoption's a real issue, right? Because nobody really knows Microsoft and Google do these things. So
yeah, but Brent, the smaller people, you want to create your own LLMs, right? That's based on your data because your data is different than other person's data. It might be similar, but you got to learn the nuances of your business in order to be really to take full advantage of this, right? So you don't want to use a public LLM if you can avoid it, right? So with these small, yes, but I agree with you. Microsoft and Google, they have huge corpuses of business data already, right? And they have organizations willing to give data and anonymize because they are those kind of companies. But the smaller people, they could say, hey, let me easily on ramp your volumes of your content by just having a web scanning application. You don't have to scan to a folder, then browse and upload and all these extra steps. You just scan directly in. And then guess what? Just scan, get everything, digitize everything quickly. And then let our AI kind of start classifying, indexing, learning based on your data and create an LLM for you, right? So I think that's an opportunity to fine tune LLMs for particular businesses. Like I said, like transportation, logistics, and healthcare, right? Even if you're in healthcare, your healthcare data is different than your competitor or your another EMR system. So you want to learn your own data. So I think that's an opportunity if that.
yeah, I think there's some commonality across data sets, right? You have
Yeah, sure.
common healthcare carriers like
Mhm.
Anthem and Harvard and United. Yeah, so I think certain, fringe, processes would benefit from their own large language. But I thought, DocuWare 10 plus years ago, they came out with that intelligent indexer, which crowdsourced internally within the DocuWare infrastructure. And I always thought that was kind of a unique approach until Microsoft kind of crowdsourced globally. But to your point, I mean, somebody that uses it in Brazil versus the US, it's going to look and feel a lot different. And certainly, I would say, we focus on horizontal APAR, HR contracts, which a lot of the DocuWare customers, I assume, would also focus on. So there's some benefit to having that, crowdsourced data, so to speak, these pre-built knowledge bases. What do you see like? What does 10 years from now look like as it relates to IDP and capture? I mean, how can it really change that much
I
than what we are today?
I think it's kind of obvious because we're kind of getting there, but it's gonna, like I said, it takes a long time for things to evolve. I think that voice is going to be the next thing because even scanning document, click, 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 and then retrieving, click, 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 right? You're interfacing with keyboards, and I think you're just going to be talking to your devices. You're going to be talking to your docs. You're going to be talking to your, for search, you're going to say,
Conversational, right? We're so
it,
conversational
it
as it
will.
is, right?
And you're
Text
talking,
messages,
mhm.
social,
Yeah,
yeah, conversational.
you're talking to your
Interesting.
cars, you're talking to your refrigerators, you're talking to your coffee machines. It's just going to be natural. Like walk up to a machine, say, hey, I want to scan to Brent, make sure the document's redacted and put it in his email. Then it'll say, oh, which email address, right? It'll come back to you and they'll say, okay, I want to send it to his Gmail, right? And then you'll do that. And then when you go to search, you'll say, hey, I want to retrieve all the accounts receivable documents that we got in the last 7 days where I can get 15% discount. And then some kind of business person that's getting paid like too much money can just do reports instead of they go to IT, then IT has to kind of understand what the person's asking. They write a SQL statement, they come back, the data is 2 weeks old by that time. And then the executive says, no, I wanted it this way, right? So they could just ask questions in natural language.
Conversational, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you saw like Total Agility just came out with that Copilot, and
Mhm.
I know I use Copilot within Power Automate and Power Platform, and you could just tell Copilot, "Hey, I want you to design a flow that does blah 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 blah," and it just automatically programs it for you. It's kind of amazing. So, yeah, right now it's more developmental, but I think as you point out, the more and more this is accessible, Siri probably turns into Copilot at some point because, as you
Yeah.
pointed out, like Echo, Siri, Alexa, whatever it is, they're not as smart as they should be. I guess at this point.
Yeah. And natural language understanding is not an easy thing, right?
Yeah,
Siri did what failed at first because it was overly broad, right? Amazon succeeded because they focus on movies and books and things that they knew very, very well, e-commerce kind of stuff, right? And then they added weather and whatnot. But if you still ask it something very obscure, it's might not know that. But so Amazon ultimately kind of won that battle because they had, to your point about Microsoft and Google having access to business data. Amazon had access to all these kind of consumer kind of things that people were asking it. So I think that's the next phase is ease of use, right? And in that talking to machines and talking to computers and having them understand and provide feedback is super duper good, but then there's the other side, Brent, and this is where my security comes in. It's like then you have all these things that are going on with what's the Google AI thing or the
Gemini, Gemini.
Gemini. Yeah. See, and then there's bias and how people develop it. So there's going to be this huge debate about this, and then it slows things down,
Yeah,
and then people have concerns. So with new things and new inventions and these new mega trends, like this is a huge mega trend, right? AI
yeah.
is huge.
Technology inflection beyond inflection is probably the biggest inflection point I think we've ever had.
The computers are still computers, right? They
Right.
they don't think like humans, and
Well, there you got Neuralink from Elon. And you got now you could think, hey, scan a piece of paper and talk to directly to. It's all like Star Trek type stuff.
it is. It's
Very
here though.
interesting.
It's
Yeah,
really it's
we're
here.
on the precipice where
It,
some of the technology is really catching up.
it,
And I
it
also think it has to do with, us older guys. We're more technology focused, but as those consumers exit, the baby boomers and such, and these kids that grew up with Google Classroom and everything electronic are entering the workforce, and they're expecting more automation. They're expecting to be able to talk to things, and I think that's also driving adoption.
it is because they are the next generation of
Right?
users, right? And the expectations are way higher than in our days, right? And latency, performance, availability, all those things have to happen. Like if I can't tweet for 15 seconds, and all of a sudden it's like a crisis, right? So
Right.
my TikTok needs to be available 24/7.
Yeah,
So
broadband access, really in the last 10 years has been cell towers didn't handle the whole. Have you seen the movie Blackberry? These cell towers just couldn't handle the data load. Now they're amazingly resilient and you can get speeds that allow us to do a lot of this stuff, right? So the infrastructure's now there. Yeah, I remember when T1, 1.54 megabits a second. I mean, that was a fast connection.
Yeah.
And now that's just silly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
like
So
multiple, like OC3s or whatever they call them. Like they have the bandwidth is like the band's like huge fiber optic cables.
right. I mean, yeah. I mean, if everything's fiber and you're getting 100 gig up, 100 gig down. I mean, so the speeds. So yeah, I mean, listen, Kevin, could talk to you all day. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. We talked about a number of different things around IoT and security and capture, with the TWAIN networking groups doing. I appreciate your time. Any last comments?
I think you guys have a blog coming out that kind of goes through the history, so I encourage people to go read that when it's posted, because it does give you perspective, and it gives you appreciation for what can be done. Like we're talking about all these cybersecurity things and scanner and net connectivity and IDP and AI systems and workflows and speech and natural language. Like all the technology exists, so just put it together. And then you have the application of the future. That's super smart. It's resilient. It's future-proof. It's secure. All these. And you know what, Brent? We could provide business efficiency. Sure, that's great, right? Fantastic. We could save money and costs. It save people's jobs. But maybe there's a cure for cancer. That's why I'm really
Innovation.
hopeful for it.
Right.
I really and make the world a better place. If you decide, Brent, you want to go to your kids' soccer games and you can get your job done quicker. You can go see, the soccer game or the dance recital, right? Or you could choose to do what you want to do as
Quality of life with
right.
technology helping you. Yes.
That's right.
So where can people find you, Kevin?
So p3idtech.com. I'm very available on LinkedIn, like you said. I'm all over LinkedIn. Just hit me up with a
out there.
Message. Yeah, follow me. Share a thought. I'm always trying to put out provocative things, new things like cybersecurity breaches and how they could be avoided, like MGM resorts and Change Healthcare, and how we could have avoided these things. So I love it. I love a good simulated conversation like this, Brent. And I think we just need to kind of just keep sharing what's possible, what's available. Maybe we weren't aware of TWAIN Direct, but now more people will be exposed to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Well, I appreciate everyone attending today, our Automation Action Podcast 2. Kevin, you've been a great guest. Thanks for attending, and look forward to our next podcast. Stay tuned, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate it.
Yep,
Take
bye.
care. Bye-bye.